Hello and welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Electric Election Podcast. We are in the Shenandoah Valley, God's country, right outside Woodstock, Virginia, and I'm joined by William French Jr. of French Brothers Dairy, an old friend of mine. I've been trying to get to this farm, actually, for almost 13 years, and what makes it so exciting, in that period of time, this farm has gone robotic. Can you tell us a little about where we are and what makes this dairy farm so special?
Absolutely. So this dairy farm is actually on the ground that my great-great-grandparents' house is on, which was right over there. My great-grandparents' house is right behind us. And so this farm has been here for over 100 years. And about 5 years ago, we made a move to robotic dairy farming, which you can see behind us. And it is a system that gives the cows free choice to move through. They get fed there, which helps draw them into the robots. And once there, they get milked. So it's a system that cleans and attaches the milking equipment, allows the cows to be milked out. And then once they're done, they get booted back into the barn.
So my story about learning about kind of robotic farming actually starts with you. And about 5 years ago, I remember you telling me that you were working with John Deere, that you'd gotten your robotics degree out of Virginia Tech. Go Hokies, you know.
That's right, go Hokies.
Exactly, but can you speak a little bit to those who aren't as familiar with kind of the driverless robotic kind of automated trend in farming and why that's so important long term?
Sure. So I think the great untold success story of American agriculture is how cheap our food is, right? We go to the grocery store, we spend a phenomenally low amount of money on the food that's there, and that's all made possible by the efficiency that we drive on modern farms. And that comes from farmers being more efficient with their inputs, so growing more corn for less fertilizer. We get much more milk per cow based on the feed that we feed them. And all of that is enabled by this technology that we have that tells us which of our cows are the high producing cows, right? So which cows do we want to make sure that we keep the calves from so that our herd becomes more efficient? And technology enables that in every facet right now, crops, livestock, really the full spectrum, and robotics is just one part of that.
So if you wanted to tell the story of kind of American farming and all of that innovation to somebody who's not really familiar with it, one of those great bits that I've enjoyed about this road trip is, we're going from rural to urban, and you realize really in the rural communities they feel misunderstood. Where would you kind of start to try to explain to somebody who can't have the time to come out here why you're trying to make a difference, where you're trying to make the best use of your land, and why this is actually really important to the long-term story of American success?
Sure. That's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
We are a small business. We're probably a medium-sized business, but very involved from a family standpoint. Like I said, great-great-grandparents, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, me, and hopefully future generations will continue to work this farm. And that's all enabled by us being efficient businessmen. By efficient business practices, using data and engaging with our customers, and to really try to explain to people in urban areas, people that come from Seattle, what it means to be on a farm. We're not Old MacDonald in overalls. We are running businesses. Every farm that you see is a small enterprise, and they're run like modern businesses. So all the computers that we use, all the data that we collect to make these kind of decisions are the same data that you'd see in a grocery store or a pharmacy or any number of small businesses across America.
Well, and that's that kind of concept, whether you're at John Deere working on automation, whether you're back at GM working on electric trucks, there's actually a thread of what I would call green manufacturing, or just like really American-made sustainable practices that become really important, whether it's rural or urban. Do you think we could do a better job looking at America as a whole versus kind of splitting it apart? Because it really is a pretty common thread here.
Yeah, so for us, being environmental stewards is extremely important to us, right? Our livelihood is the land. So we want to take care of that for ourselves and for future generations. And that is the environmentalism that we talk about, just in a slightly different name, right? And one that applies to us and farmers. And it also is driven by efficiency, which is getting more outputs for the same inputs. And that's a common thread across all of us, right? Every business out there wants to generate more money for the same input costs, use their data more efficiently. And so we're really singing the same song, right? It's just ours involves a lot more cows.
Well, and there are cows everywhere. There are cows pooping. There are cows peeing. This is a real process. One thing that kind of connects for me on this whole conversation is this concept of trying to diversify what you can produce or get more out of it. You'd mentioned that farmers in America, if they'd been producing a certain product, or I learned about corn, it really hasn't changed. The price of corn hasn't gone up. There's not ways to really make extra money there. Where do you think we could do a better job to try to help farmers incentivize mixing in, let's say, solar panels on their land where they might have grass that's usually for cows, or adding in ways for them? We talked a little bit about growing CBD, because it's a bush that grows really fast, so you could carbon sequester maybe in areas you couldn't actually get value. Where do you kind of think about the 21st century farmer and how we can do a better job preparing them for a new marketplace?
Diversification is an interesting concept. We're actually a very diversified operation here. We have dairy, beef, and we sell some of our crops. It really depends on the farms themselves and their locations and their customer base, right? So informing customers in Northern Virginia, which is nearby to us, across the country on what does American agriculture produce, what's the best way to support small, medium, large farms, right? By buying American-made products, buying value-added products. So there's a lot of farms that their diversification, they're a dairy farm, they continue to produce dairy, but they'll also sell cheese or ice cream or something from a farm stand, and that allows them to get a lot more value from their raw product.
I'm traveling around the United States right now with a group of people, all different backgrounds, ethnicities, kind of geographic areas. You and I both met as, kind of in our own way, closeted people. You're from kind of rural Virginia. I'm from, outside of Seattle. It's a bit of its own bubble. And when we were pages in U.S. Congress, I think we both became more empowered, better stewards of our country. How important is it for us to travel, to pop our bubble, and to, even as much as we become, I think you're always going to be a steward of this community. I'm always going to love Seattle and try to help it. How do we bridge that gap to do the best in both of our communities? Because we shouldn't be alone. We can be connected even with this cow between us.
So I think for all of us, what social media has enabled, what talking to you on podcasts like this has enabled, is allow farmers to tell their stories and understand the commonality that we share. We grew up as two kids about as far apart in America as you can get, about as far apart culturally as you can get. But to know that we have a lot in common, we care about the same things, and to just learn your story, for you to learn my story here and see our farm and where we're from, I think helps bridge that divide a lot and let people know that we have a lot in common. American agriculture loves to tell the stories of our operation, right? We want to tell you the story of our farm because that story is getting told by people that aren't on farms right now. And I think it leads to a lot of confusion. And I think there's people who aren't telling the American agricultural story with the best interest of agriculture and its consumers. So being able to reach out, being interested in the world around you and people who share different viewpoints is incredibly important. And the opportunities we get to come visit Seattle and go to a University of Washington game, or come here to Shenandoah County and hang out in the barn, is incredibly valuable for us.
Well, and it's special. It's something that the U.S. House Page program doesn't exist anymore, but I'll never forget kind of that basis and what it really gave to me, and I think it gave to you. We've been closing out each of our conversations by asking whoever we're meeting with what they hope we find across the country. And I'll make that very personal. You probably have not known me as somebody who visited farms, and that wasn't really my background. This is one of my first experiences going all across the United States as my friend. What do you hope Saul Spady, kind of the progressive Seattleite, nut job that what do you hope he finds as he's driving around in the Tesla?
So I think what's important is to understand our commonality, right? I've driven across America. I love it. And part of the reason that I love it is I get to see, as a kid who grows up in this environment, as someone who cares about rural America, there's rural America everywhere, right? But I go to a city and I see things that very much I have in common with people that live there. So to get out and see what we have in common, what makes America so special. You know, there's deserts and grasslands and mountains and oceans, and I think we're incredibly fortunate to live in the country that we do and have the ability to travel in the way that we travel. But just to go out and understand that it all looks different. We're all told that we are very different people right now, but there's a great commonality across this. If you see that on your trip, then you've had a great one, right?
Well, you've described a lot of what we found on the trip. You've described a lot of why I value you as a friend so much. And man, thank you for responding to my text message. For everybody out there, this conversation happened on like a 15-minute just spur of the moment. And this is how learning happens. We have to bridge our gaps. We have to find the friendships, and we have to really find the commonalities instead of the differences, because there are things that we can learn here in Shenandoah that can be taken back to Seattle and really the farming community where I'm from. And so it's my job to learn and share that. So thank you, my friend, and I hope to be back soon. I've heard you have a great 4th of July party.
Yeah. You can come on out.
Best
It'd be
in the
great to
country.
see you again.
All right, well, folks, this is a special edition of the Electric Election Road Trip. I'm Saul Spady signing off. William French Jr. to my left. Well, we'll see you in, where are we going next? Blacksburg, Virginia, and then Nashville, Tennessee.
Thanks, y'all.